Hello, I'm a lawyer based in Toronto, Canada, and I help immigrants and refugees. My name is Cohen Murison, and this video is a quick guide on how to claim refugee status in Canada. How to claim asylum is another way of saying it. So while this video is not legal advice, I hope it provides general information that you find useful. And if you need more help, my website and email are below. Refugee cases and this video can be broken up into two parts. So first, can you make a refugee claim? And secondly, how do you claim refugee status? So can and how, and let's start with can. Can you claim refugee status? Here is a very basic checklist. It is not complete, but if you tick these boxes, you may have a good case. Here it is on the screen. So let's talk about first, are you a convention refugee or a person in need of protection? The difference here is basically that the convention refugee is someone who belongs to a group. Are you targeted because of your group identity, your religion, or perhaps you're part of an ethnic minority, or maybe you have a sexual identity that is not permitted in your home country in terms of full expression. So in all these cases, you can see how your group identity is what is causing you to be persecuted. And the best example is if you're part of a political movement. This is what we call a convention refugee. But what is a person in need of protection? This is a person who is targeted not because of some group identity that they have, but because of something about them that is unique to them. So for example, Maria is a journalist from country X, where she has been writing investigative pieces. She's been writing about the government, it's corrupt. And after a while, she's writing more and more about the government embezzling funds, and then she receives death threats, and I don't know, one night her house is attacked, and her brother fears for his safety, and so she makes a report to the local police. They dismiss her concerns, and then they say there's no evidence. So this would be a person in need of protection. It's very different, as you can see, from a convention refugee in some sense, although there is certainly overlap. Secondly, are you still facing danger? So the danger has to be ongoing. It cannot just stop. It has to go into the future. And let's say there was a civil war that happened in your home country. Your life is threatened and you leave, so you apply in Canada for refugee status. A year passes and then the civil war ends and then your refugee claim is decided. The Immigration and Refugee Board might tell you that because the war ended, it is safe to return, so you are not a refugee. So timing is key. You can come up with reasons to convince the IRB if it makes sense to explain the delay. Third, you can't wait too long to claim refugee status. Okay, so if you got to Canada on a normal visa and then you waited a year, then you can claim asylum. But it might raise a question. Why didn't this person say they're a refugee earlier? This is how the government will look at it. And if you have a reason for the delay, that's good, problem solved. But you do need a reason. Fourth is the issue of whether you could have found safety in your home country, or if you could have found help. So could you have gone to a different province or city in your home country? Also, did you tell the police what happened? Did you file a report? Did you speak to the Human Rights Commission in your country? Did you talk, on the phone to a helpline that the government in your home country suggests that people use? Also, did you just take reasonable efforts to ensure your safety? Fifth, there's the issue of you making other refugee claims. This can interfere with bringing one in Canada. You can't bring a refugee claim if you already completed one in Canada. So for example, if you withdrew it or if it was rejected. And you also can't get approved as a refugee if you try if you succeed in claiming a refugee status in another country. So, for example, you can't become a refugee in Denmark and then come to Canada and apply as a refugee. If Denmark or another country said you're a refugee, then you have to say, okay, I'll stay in Denmark. Thirdly, if you already started a refugee claim in the US, notice I'm just saying start a refugee claim in the US, then you cannot get approved in Canada for a refugee claim. You have to complete the process in the US first. The sixth issue we have is the issue of whether you have committed a serious crime. How serious? As long as it wouldn't have got you 10 years in prison in Canada, it's fine. If it was something minor like drunk driving, it's usually okay. If it would have, then you might not be eligible. Seventh, if you lied or accidentally misled a Canadian immigration official in the past, that can be a problem. But it's a little subjective, and it will depend on the case. Now let's talk about how you apply. You basically have two options. Do you want to already be in Canada when you apply? So let's say you've been in Canada a couple months on a visa. Or do you want to apply when you arrive at the airport, as soon as you arrive? Those are your two options. Applying from inside Canada makes you an inland refugee, and applying as soon as you arrive makes you an applicant at the port of entry, or POE. This might sound weird to have these options, but it matters because there are advantages and disadvantages. Here's a chart explaining the differences between applying as soon as you arrive versus sometime after arriving. You can see the POE, point of entry process, is rushed. You arrive, suddenly you're speaking to an officer from Canada Border Services Agency. You're being interviewed immediately. Then you have 15 days to provide a basis of claim form. This is the first big form and document. So basically POE is bad because it's rushed. Inland is different. You can prepare, you have time to prepare documents for the interview that happens later in time, not immediately. So you might ask, why would anyone do point of entry, POE? It is so fast. You can't prepare. Well, actually, this is also POE's advantage in a way, because if you wait too long to apply as an inland applicant after you arrive in Canada, then the government may say, well, why did you wait so long? If you really are a refugee, then you should have applied earlier. And also, why did you come to Canada on some other visa or using some other status instead of telling us earlier that you were a refugee? So now there's sometimes reasons, and the delay can be explained, and that's fine. But the government needs to see some kind of a story that makes sense over time. So coming to Canada on a family violence temporary resident permit could make sense. You were escaping from a violent situation, and perhaps that same violent situation is the very reason that you later apply for a refugee claim. So we said there are inland, and we said there are POE, refugee claims. Now let's discuss inland a little bit in more detail. How do you do it? First, you go on Google, okay, and you just search for start a refugee claim in Canada. And this will take you to the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC website, and specifically their refugee portal. So if you're applying alone, you apply through the personal portal, and if you have a representative like a lawyer or someone else, then this is the representative portal that you're using. And your first job will basically be to upload documents for your profile and answering honestly fairly easy questions. It's not very difficult, and then after a few weeks you'll have an interview with an officer. An eligibility interview is what they call it, and they will ask you questions and determine if you are eligible to be a refugee. So it is really important not to lie to officers in this interview. If they catch you on a lie, it is called misrepresentation, and we did talk about that earlier. It alone can make you ineligible for refugee claims. So make sure you have a consistent story, that you have reasons, and that if you say one thing, you don't say another later in time at the interview. It's typical that people will bring a basis of claim form to the eligibility interview. So you will have had to have prepared this form in advance, and you'll bring it in with supporting documentation to the interview. And then after some time, hopefully, the government will just say, look, you're eligible to claim refugee status. And remember, this doesn't mean that you are a refugee. It just means that you can now have a hearing. You can essentially talk in front of the Immigration Refugee Board, which acts kind of like a judge. So now, basically, you just have to prepare for the refugee hearing. This hearing is often a long time away. So the time it will take a refugee case from start to finish is often between 6 months to 2.5 years. The hearing will be at the refugee court. Technically, however, it's not a court, it's a branch of the government, and it's technically a tribunal. But basically, it's like a court, and if anyone asks what court it is, you just say it's the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, IRB for short. And if they say, oh, what is the IRB? You'll say, well, it's it's sort of like a court, but it's not. And if they ask, well, what part of the IRB are you filing your claim in? And you'll say, oh, okay, it's the RPD, the Refugee Protection Division. So that's the part handling refugee claims. So basically, it's a lot of acronyms, but it's the IRB and the RPD. And again, when is your court appearance going to be? It's going to be often between 6 months to 2.5 years. So there's a lot of variation in the timelines. And the refugee hearing, it's designed for people to represent themselves, but to be honest, the board is very strict. So if you don't prepare your evidence and arguments correctly, you could lose your case. A lawyer will submit written submissions, and these are basically legal arguments, and they will prepare your supporting documents, which get added to your basis of claim form over time, making it stronger. Whereas you might not know exactly what documents to bring or how thorough they have to be. So yeah, if you get a lawyer or someone who knows how the refugee process works, it can help tremendously in how you present your case. So honestly, yeah, you should take a look at I don't know your specific situation or your specific country, but if you want to see statistics, there are actually basically Excel spreadsheets that are published. So in the link that I've included below, there's a big graph that you'll see, and it shows all people who've applied for refugee status in Canada, and what countries they're from, what the success rate is like every single year. This itself is not indicative exactly of how your case will turn out, but I suppose it's a useful illustration of the process. So that's been refugee claims, and when to do them, and how to do them. And if you want more help, just give me a shout. My contact details are below, and I know that whatever position you're in, whatever problems you may face, the future is always bright. If you keep trying, you'll make it. Okay, so best of luck.